Hello again and good evening from Metro Manila, the Philippines, Southeastern Asia. I continue my brief series of videos on the US presidents who, according to Business Insider and Masonic Dictionary, were Freemasons. At least according to the Business Insider article from 2017, which is my main source, or one of my main sources for this video series, 14 for individuals to have served as US presidents so far have been Freemasons. Theodore Roosevelt was known for coining such phrases as uh, speak softly and carry a big stick, you will go far, and then for criticizing those early 20th century American journalists who were trying to find examples of all kinds of, or many kinds of evil, including corruption and poverty in the prosperous or officially prosperous United States, um, calling them muckrakers who focus too much on the social evils and not enough on the good things that existed even in the United States and in the rest of the world. And he also was a proponent of the strenuous life. He practiced a variety of sports, including even boxing, uh, and up to the first presidential term that he had. He was a member of the Dutch Reformed Church. No wonder, since he was, just like his distant cousin Franklin Roosevelt, who also served as US president, albeit as a Democrat. Roosevelt was a Republican, then a progressive during the 1912 presidential election campaign when he unsuccessfully tried to recapture the presidency after having observed the two-term rule, although for him it was not quite full 2 terms since he was president for 7.5 years, having succeeded the assassinated William McKinley in September 1901. But anyway, having retired in 1909, he tried to become president again in 1913, but failed because Democrat Woodrow Wilson defeated him. He was famous for stating that it was sacrilegious and otherwise wrong to print or mint "In God We Trust" on the US dollar coins, and I think banknotes, and tried unsuccessfully to have it removed. According to William A. de Gregorio's The Complete Book of US Presidents, the late President Theodore Roosevelt also opposed such doctrines as the confession of sins and good works and some other doctrines I forget now. Oh yeah, well, he opposed the doctrine of papal infallibility. According to him, it was the hallmark of true Christians to be also doers of the Word of God, not only its hearers or readers. He seems to have had quite a civic minded conception of the Christian faith, a very duty bound conception of it. He joined the Dutch Reformed Church as a teenager in New York and wrote of his beliefs. I know not how philosophers may ultimately define religion, but from Micah to James, so the prophet Micah, and then James being one of the apostles, it has been defined as service to one's fellow men, rendered or given by following the great rule of justice and mercy, of wisdom and righteousness. But this hardly is a very uniquely Christian definition of religion, because it says nothing about Jesus Christ and his death on the cross, his blood, his resurrection, his ascension, let alone his second coming. This emphasis on religion, which I would call more civic religion than Christian religion, by my standards, sorry if I'm incorrect, led Roosevelt to equate patriotism and religion. In his book Fear God and Take Your Own Part, he observed, unless we are thoroughgoing Americans and unless our patriotism is part of the very fiber of our being, we can neither serve God nor take our own part. He applied his understanding of Christianity to domestic and foreign policy. We must demand honesty, justice, mercy, truthfulness in our dealings with one another within our own borders. outside of our own borders, we must treat other nations as we would wish to be treated in return, judging each in any given crisis as we ourselves ought to be judged. A regular churchgoer, he issued 9 Thanksgiving proclamations as US president. For the very reason that in material well being we have thus abounded, we owe it to the Almighty to show equal progress in moral and spiritual things, he urged fellow citizens. Let us therefore as a people set our faces resolutely against evil, and with broad charity, meaning love, with kindliness and goodwill toward all men, but with unflinching determination to smite down wrong, strive with all the strength that is given us for righteousness in public and in private life. I recommend that the people meet devoutly to thank the Almighty for the many and great blessings they have received in the past, and to pray that they may be given the strength so to order their lives as to deserve a continuation of these blessings in the future. The Masonic the Masonic Dictionary comments that Roosevelt was initiated on January the 2nd, passed on March the 27th, and was raised on April the 24th, 1901. So only in 1901, the same year when he served briefly as US vice president and began his 7.5-year presidency. So he was 42 years old. In the Matinicock Lodge, number 806 in Oyster Bay, New York State. Pentalpha Lodge number 23 in Washington, D.C. made him an honorary member on April the 4th, 1904, as did the Illinois Masonic Veterans Association in 1903. He had participated in the Spanish-American War in 1898. On November the 5th, 1902, he attended the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania celebration of Washington's initiation in Philadelphia. In Washington, D.C., on February the 21st, 1903, he honored the Masonic ceremonies of laying the cornerstone of the Army War College with his presence. On May the 26th, 1903, he broke ground for a Masonic temple at Spokane, Washington. On April the 14th, 1906, he attended the Masonic cornerstone laying of the House of Representatives building in Washington, D.C., where he delivered the address, presenting a bound copy of it to the Grand Master. And on June the 8th, 1907, he wore Masonic regalia and delivered an address at the laying of the cornerstone of the new Masonic temple in Washington, D.C. So, does Business Insider state? The Theodore Roosevelt Center has digitized many of the 26th US president's letters, some of which reference his Masonic activities. He spoke to the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania in 1902 on the anniversary of Washington's initiation. In his speech, he reflected on some of his own reasons for joining the Freemasons. One of the things that attracted me so greatly to Masonry, that I hailed the chance of becoming a Mason, was that it really did act up to what we as a government and as a people are pledged to, of treating each man on his merits as a man. Well, never mind the fact that Christians are forbidden to offer specifically Christian prayers, never mind the fact that neither the men of the lower social classes, below the middle class, that is, regardless of how virtuous they may be by human standards, are invited, and women are excluded as well. And never mind that most of that charity, especially of the deep charity, is shown to fellow Freemasons, not to the non-Freemasons, in my opinion. And then he described George Washington as having gone into a lodge of the fraternity, and then of having gone into the one place in the United States where he stood below or above his fellows according to their official position in the lodge. He went into the place where the idea of our government was realized as far as it is humanly possible for mankind to realize a lofty idea. But he also had occasional disagreements with fellow Masons. In his letters, he criticized one alleged Mason for attempting to use his position in the society for a political advantage, which is against the Freemasonry's rule, and complained about another situation in a letter to a friend, writing that one foe was endeavoring or trying to use Masonry to my political disadvantage. After his presidency, Roosevelt wrote about traveling the world and visiting Masonic lodges in Nairobi, which is now Kenya's capital, and the Azores, which belong to Portugal. He died of a heart attack, or died in his sleep on January the 6th, 1919, aged 60, at Sagamore Hill, Oyster Bay, New York State, after a blood clot had detached from a vein and traveled to his lungs. On his last night alive, on January the 5th, 1919, he had suffered breathing problems and had been treated by his physician, Dr. George W. Fowler, and then temporarily he had felt better and had gone to bed. His last recorded words were, "Please put out that light, James," to his family servant, James Amos. Apparently, he was given normal funeral services, not Masonic ones, at Christ Episcopal Church in Oyster Bay. From his travels in the jungles, he had contracted diseases which quickly undermined his health, especially in 1918. He was hospitalized for 7 weeks in the last months of 1918 and never fully recovered.